So what is our objective? Why are we growing like this? Why do we want to be on all the globes? And this goes back to the essence of what we are trying to do. People say the world's a global village, picking up on the brilliant mind of McLuhan, that communications causes us to be networked. People use the word globalization to indicate that there is an integrated economy that links everybody together. And they're right. They're right. The manifestation of the global village in communications we see through the power of the social networks, which just reinforces the power of the internet and everything else. And we can see how it becomes increasingly impossible to block communications and so on. Information now leaks and spreads through handheld devices that are increasingly intelligent, that can not just forward messages by voice and messages by electronic means, but they can actually take real-time pictures and send them and so on. And they'll leak out of all kinds of places where people try and block the information, even in places of oppression like Syria. And as far as the globalization is concerned, what better documentation do you need than the European debt crisis to explain how the world is so interconnected? That's why the American administration is so concerned about what happens in Europe. That's why the Chinese are so concerned about what happens in Europe. Who's going to buy all their products if the Europeans aren't being successful? China's not independent of Europe. It's completely linked into Europe. And the Chinese hold those $2 trillion in U.S. currency. If that currency goes, what are they holding? A bunch of useless paper, like after the Civil War in the United States and the Southern currency. So the whole financial structure is, in fact, interlinked. Okay, how does that affect our work? Well, we know it affects our work because one of the reasons we went after Nightingale, a British or UK-based architectural practice in healthcare, and not a big American firm, was because they are working for all of these large construction contractors on the European platform. Why did that happen? Because the UK for over a decade has been acquiring healthcare assets and educational assets through design-build or design-build finance, what in Canada we call private-public partnerships, P3, or in some parts of the world they prefer to call it PFI, Private Finance Initiative. And because of the rules of the European Union, any such publicly bid project has to be open to competitors from all the countries. So, contractors from Scandinavia, from Germany, from Holland, from France, as well as from the UK itself, were all present. And Nightingale, because they're at the top of performance, worked with all of them. And therefore they have those relationships. And it's those contractors who operate on a world scale who are going to go around the world and are going around the world and who would want us as architects to go with them around the world. That's the meaning to us of the globalization. And it happens beyond that. You now have increasingly pension plans who invest in real estate around the world and need professional advice. You have major development companies that are moving around the world, working with those pension plans who finance them. And we can be their, if you will, professional of choice in physical development all around the world. So you'll say, okay, he's provided an answer. The answer as to why we want to be global is because we can then have access to global markets. And that's definitely the commercial motivation. There's another aspect to it, the negative, the defense against the negative. We all saw what happened when the U.S. fell so badly. We made a bigger effort to grow into the Asian markets and now into Brazil, because they have a lot of population that needs better housing, better schools, better hospitals, better transportation, better everything that we design. And so it gives us opportunity to shift what we do to where it's in demand. So that's another dimension of the negative side, if you will, the risk management, balancing or complementing the positive side of moving in a positive direction with global operators. And we're developing those relationships very conscientiously in the transport field, in the social infrastructure field, and in the real estate development field. But there's something even deeper than that. There's something even deeper than that, than the pure, if you will, commercial reason. And this is, for me, the real reason and the most personally satisfying aspect of what we're doing. And that is reaching for the pinnacle of excellence. Now, what is excellence? Excellence in terms of our work is essentially intelligence. I don't mean intelligence in the sense of spying, but I mean knowledge and understanding, and the ability to take that knowledge and understanding and integrate it into every piece of work that we perform. And that's the reason to be global and to practice around the world, and to practice at a large scale, because you learn from every experience. We say, in the great rabbis in Judaism say, who is a smart individual? Who learns from every person. In everything we do, we can learn. And it's that learning that each of us, in performing our work, can then share with colleagues, and that we can distill and bring together and form a firm of people which has intelligence that can be deployed to all the projects that we do. And that's the existential essence of what we're trying to achieve. And I see it then as being what we call the global designer of local communities. That we develop this intelligence at a global scale, but we deliver it locally. Because we all know that our clients want us to be there with them and to be attentive to their needs and understanding and see that it's adapted as they need it, and that it's responsive and sensitive to local culture and local environments and local rules and local procedures and so on. So you must be local. But if you're only a sum of a bunch of localities, then you're just a bunch of localities. The essence of us is to have this world, global intelligence. Now, intelligence in what? The way to explain it best and understand it best is to look at our intelligence system practice that Scott and our other leaders of that practice have built so beautifully on the legacy of Neil Irwin, our chairman emeritus, and before him, Dr. Joseph Cates. What is intelligence systems? It's systems that are smart, that perform functions that we couldn't do as efficiently or do at all without that intelligence. So the intelligence provides the basis of making systems that enable us to do things that change the way that we do them and raise them to a different quality. And now we must think about that kind of intelligence in everything we do. Now, there's a natural application in healthcare, because healthcare is so demanding of understanding and intelligence. Without that, you can't actually design a hospital. You can design a small clinic. Everybody has some basic idea of how it works. It's not very complicated. You can design it. But when you get into big healthcare facilities, you're dealing with cutting-edge technology. It's changing rapidly. You all know how, for example, surgery has changed. And as a result of the changes in surgery and methods that are less brutal in their intervention, Surgery now is delivered differently. Our good partner, Peter Zerwell, is sharing with us how in Denver there was this smart clinic. He got his whole hip changed in 45 minutes and was out of the clinic in hours. Compare that to what people used to suffer, and compare that to the occupancy time of the hospital afterwards for days and people visiting. So the whole balance of the operation of the facility changes dramatically. And to plan that facility, your ratio of beds to diagnostics and treatments changes. There is how the global scale informs the ability to deliver locally by intelligence. And what I've said about healthcare, while it's so clear in healthcare, just as it is in systems, applies increasingly to education. All of you who went through school and so on and now have children who are going through school are aware of the difference, the way education is actually, the educational experience exists today compared to what it was a generation ago, and in my case, 2 generations ago. This classroom becomes increasingly a place that gets replaced by places of meeting and interaction. People have all the information they need on their computer or handheld device. And so they learn in a different way, and they need a different physical environment. And so it changes how we design schools. That's intelligence of the technology in building. And that's something that we can develop through this global practice. Now there's a second major area. While the intelligence may be changing in technological terms, there's a greater constancy in the human race. We aren't very different fundamentally than we were 1,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago. And we all have personal senses. And in those personal senses, we all react differently to spatial environments. And I don't just mean the spatial configuration, but the environment within a space. We're affected by smell. We're affected by sound. We're affected by light. We're affected by the color. We're affected by the proportions of the space. These are what people like to refer to as sensory-based design. But we need evidence. We need evidence as to how people are reacting, because different cultures react to different degrees, and their senses are more heightened than other cultures in different ways, in different degrees. And then there's a third aspect of intelligence: doing things intelligently, doing our work intelligently. We're taking a major effort now to improve our systems, and Scott will talk about it. There's our drawing systems, there's our reporting systems, there's our standards to make sure that we can share and work together. And this is part of intelligence. And then there's the intelligence of the technical aspects of the work itself. Not the doing of the work, but the product. For Tim Gorley, it's knowing the best way to detail against rain penetration of the wall, curtain wall. And for others in transit, like Celia Johnson or Richard Stevens, it's knowing about the detailed aspects of the, if you will, maintenance implications and operation implications of certain materials and certain layouts in transit. Those are 4 categories of intelligence, all of which are critically valuable to the quality of our work, and all of which we can reach for as we become increasingly that global designer with a vast range of work. But finally, all the science and the research and all the intelligence is the necessary ingredient to greatness, but greatness finally rests on the inspiration and creativity of the human mind. And that is what I would like us to strive to be, the global designer that's informed by global activity, delivers locally, but is inspired and creative in what we do.